Hello, everyone. My microphone's working, isn't it? I'd like to start by asking you a question. Can you show me, please, how hungry you are this morning? I want you to put your hands really high if you're very, very hungry, haven't had any breakfast, very low down here if you're not hungry at all. Johnny, you need some breakfast. Okay, there's quite a lot of hungry people in this room. And how much caffeine have you had this morning? Again, up here if you've had loads, lots of wired people, down here if not very much. Okay, great. Now I'd like you to put one hand on your head if you ever participated in theatre when you were small, when you were a child. Lovely. And can you put a second hand on your head, please, if that experience meant a lot to you? Was it a significant experience to you? Amazing. Could I have a volunteer just to tell me a little bit? Yeah, could you tell me, what was the experience? Why did it mean so much?
I was not good at writing, and it was a way of using words that was available to me.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like you've just done my presentation for me. Thank you. Finally, I'd like you to just take a moment to think about a gesture or a movement that represents how you're feeling about the news these days. So it can be something big, you can stand up and do something big, or it can just be something with your hands. So if you could do that gesture now, when you're reading the news, when you're watching it, listening to it, how does that make you feel? Okay, thank you, Nicola. Thank you. Okay, you can let go of your movements. My name, let me see whether this works, yeah. My name is Victoria LUPTON, and thank you to Johnny and Ellie and Lisa and all the team for having me here. I'm founder and president of an organization called Scenario, non-profit, that works in these countries, in Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and also here in the UK. At the heart of everything that we do is meaningful participation. What does that mean? Well, it's what you were just doing. Simply put, it's a way for a group of people to get involved and for their voices to be heard. I want to start by telling you a story about a young woman in her early 20s called Rania. This is Rania. Her first project with Scenario was a youth theatre play 7 years ago. That's her on the left, doing the youth theatre play. When she was 15 years old, she was a participant and I was the director. She then participated in a women's theatre production, that's the photo in the middle, whose creation was the subject of Scenario's award-winning documentary film, Tilka. And then afterwards, she took a theatre leadership training with Scenario, leading theatre with children. Rania is Lebanese, and she's black. She grew up in Dar el-Eitam, an orphanage in Beirut, and she's never known who her parents are, as she talks a lot about in the film. I want to just play you a very brief, it's just a minute long, clip from our film, Tilka. Can we turn it on?
كنت أنا هيدي البنت اللي مضلني عم بتخبى وكانت الثقة تعيدها بالأرض بس بعدين أول مرة كانت الثقة تعيدها على الستيج بس بعدين أول مرة حتى تحكي عن حالك لحتى أنت هون حتى تحكي عن حالك لحتى توصلي الأشياء اللي أنت بدك توصليها زمان بس مو قادرة فبلشت أحكي شوي شوي عن مشاكلي بلشت بعدين صرت أتناقش مع العالم عن المشاكل اللي عم بتصير معي بلبنان بطلت أستحي منه بطلت أستحي بالمواقف اللي عم بتصير معي سيناريو كانت هذا الداعم اللي قالي بهالشيء لانه هي اللي اعطتني الفرصه بلا مقابل هي اللي اعطتني الفرصه اطلع احكي للمجتمع عن حالي وغير 20% من الاراده اللي كنت مخبيه فيه انه انا بدي ابين بالمجتمع انا بدي اثبت حالي وانا سبيك اب
Scenario makes participatory theatre. That means a group of participants don't just attend a play or perform from a script. They come together to tell stories. They tell their own stories and those of their communities, but they also imagine new stories. Through a gradual process of devising, their stories are molded into a final script, and then they perform that script in front of an audience. This mode of participatory theatre making, where participants own not only the performance, but the entire creative process, coming back to your thought, Johnny, about process and performance at the end, has a unique power, which I've seen again and again, to build up an individual's sense of agency and dignity. To take a few steps back, I co-founded Scenario in 2015 in response to the massive movement of people coming over the border from Syria. I lost a mic. Into Lebanon as a result of the Syrian revolution and war. We began by working in Syrian and Palestinian refugee camps. Our work addresses a number of social problems. The mental health crisis in the Arab region, particularly amid the wars of the past 19 months, social tensions which are high and rising between people of different religious and national backgrounds, marginalized communities not having access to arts or creative expression or jobs in the arts sector, and this is particularly important in the Arab region. Youth unemployment in the Arab region is more than 24%, which is double the global average. And finally, overstretched schools and undertrained teachers, which prevents a decent education for everybody. We address these problems through a number of programs. Firstly, we make space for diverse groups of children, youth, and women to create and perform theatre. Second, we train adults as theatre facilitators and leaders, and we connect them to relevant jobs. And third, we train teachers to deliver the curriculum through play, often in collaboration with national ministries of education, using high-level resources in Arabic, English, and French, and that includes our mobile phone app, the Scenario Play Kit. So our programs aim to support people through theatre and play across the whole life cycle. We bring play to the classrooms of very young kindergarten children. We make theatre with older children and with youth and women, and we train adults to lead that theatre. So as you heard from Rania, Scenario isn't just telling the stories of people who are rarely heard, but we're giving those people the tools and the platforms to tell their own stories and be heard, and to teach other people to tell their own stories in turn and to be heard. We're here to ask this question of, does art work? As an NGO that has to apply for funding, this is a question we ask ourselves all the time, and one way of answering it is in terms of outcomes, which we rigorously evaluate and measure. So, our art works in that our participants develop life skills, those life skills that they need to reach their full potential. Our participants have creative outlets for self-expression, improving their well-being. There are positive interactions between divergent communities, which makes society more cohesive. Communities are enriched by access to arts and creative expressions, and teachers are happier and more inspired, and children are more engaged in their learning. But is that a genuine answer to the framing question, does art work? What does it mean for art to work? I think that there's a deeper but less tangible answer to that question, which feels true to the transformational experience that people like Rania have undergone. It lies somewhere in this process of creating conditions for people to tell their stories, which can be a profoundly personal experience of self-realization, and be heard, and crucially be heard, which is by definition public and collective, involving as it does the formation of a relationship between the storyteller and the audience. Together, I've seen this process of telling the story and being heard provide individuals with a sense of justice and accountability, which then motivates them to build a more dignified and inclusive future for others in their communities. In our film, which you watched a clip from, Tilka, another female participant who's a Syrian refugee called Najah says, this is a quote, "I'm a person who's changing, I have changed, and I will create change." So it's not just that theatre works directly to create policy by itself. Theatre doesn't have necessarily the power to do that. But the process of staging stories does have the power to inspire change at both the personal and community level. That's what Scenario's work is built on. And nowhere is this change more needed than in the region in which we work. Over 10 years, we've become used to dealing with political, economic, and security crises, with governments in the region and political systems that consistently fail to represent or empower people. But the conflict with Israel of the past 19 months has pushed Palestine, Lebanon, and the region into the abyss. You may know the numbers: 62,000 killed in Gaza by Israeli attacks as a minimum, with a current critical risk of famine and dozens of children dying of hunger or being bombed in displacement shelters. A further 1,000 people killed by the Israeli military and illegal settlers in the occupied West Bank since October 7th. 4,000 killed in Lebanon, where a quarter of the population was displaced in the recent war last autumn. Last month, I was in Damascus, and I was visiting an area of the city flattened this time by Assad's forces. It reminded me that whether it's Netanyahu's Israel or Assad's Syria, for too long, powerful governments in the region have operated with impunity. Meanwhile, the voices of the victims in these wars are consistently silenced or politicized. Indeed, to come back to the point, at the heart of these conflicts is a crisis of storytelling in the region, a crisis of whose stories are heard and whose are believed. Scenario has reached almost 180,000 people since 2015. We've made over 220 original theatre productions. That's from rough and ready shows made in a week by children in refugee camps, all the way to plays created by groups of adults that tour nationally or internationally. We've trained over 5,000 teachers in almost 500 schools, and we've trained 1,000 theatre leaders from marginalised communities, 1/3 of whom go on to secure decent employment in arts, education, or social work. We've got a team of over 150 people, and more than half of them are graduates of our own training programs at Scenario, and that means that they come from underserved backgrounds themselves. You can see here some of our recent awards. We were named one of the 120 global innovators as part of Expo Dubai 2020, and last year we were really honoured to receive the 100 Resilience in Action Award for our emergency response to the wars in Lebanon and in Palestine. Looking ahead, we have a busy year as we celebrate our 10-year anniversary this year. Since the invasion by Israel of Lebanon in October 2024, we've delivered emergency projects reaching 81 different groups of children, women, men, and teachers through theatre and play. We've aimed to respond to the needs of different communities with innovative new kinds of projects. So we've been leading a choir for the first time with a group of women in their 50s and above. The oldest woman in that group is 85 years old. We've done our first ever theatre project working with the LGBTIQ community in Beirut, who are a group working with gay and trans people who are very often sidelined by society in Lebanon. And after a year of planning, we are now beginning a major new project training teachers in Gaza to use theatre and play to support their children's well-being and mental health, as well as their engagement in learning. We've been speaking with those teachers in the last couple of months, and it's been humbling to meet with these teachers who are completely determined to gain new tools that will help them to be better teachers and support their students to cope with the trauma that they're dealing with, even as they're dialing into the Zoom calls from tents, with bullet blasts in the back of their walls, and dealing and living in the constant threat of genocide. This year, we are also kicking off our most ambitious theatre project ever, which is a participatory theatre epic told across 6 countries. So it's told across Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Egypt, and here in the UK. The project is called, as you can see, Ibn Battuta Travels. More than 250 community participants across all of these countries are going to come together and tell the story of this medieval Arab traveler. It's a story that is very well known across the Arab region. Every Arab child grows up knowing about Ibn Battuta, but it's very little known here in the UK and in the global north. So what the project's aiming to do is try to contrast the relatively free movement of people and ideas back in the 14th century with the contemporary regional realities of visa restrictions and buffer zones, occupation and conflict. And you can see that the performances in London are next month, in case you'd be interested to come. Ultimately, that project, as all of Scenarios, asks the same questions. Who gets to tell their stories in the Arab region? Who gets to be heard? This question couldn't be more important right now because, as the writer Rebecca Solnit says, this is a quote, "Who gets to tell the story is who gets to shape the culture, who gets to frame the debate, and who gets to determine what is true." I would add to that, what theatre does is not only about people getting to tell their story, it's also about staging stories so that they can be heard by an audience. Whose story is heard, and not just who gets to tell it, that shapes the culture and determines what is true. And that, for us, is the work that art does. I'm just going to finish, if you'll allow me, by just sharing a video. It's only a minute long, covering our projects in 2024. Thank you.